So we are now moving to our second segment, which is an update about Luigi Mangione. And for that, we're going to be joined by Jamie Peck and Sam Beard. They are co-hosts of the Party Girls podcast. Jamie Peck, before that, co-hosted the Antifada podcast and worked for 4 years as a producer, contributor on The Majority Report with Sam Seder. And she has done a lot of journalism focusing on grassroots activism, government policy, feminist perspectives, and electoral politics. And she's also done a lot of work around Cop City and stopping Cop City. And Sam Beard is a Chicago-based organizer, writer, and media specialist who's been active in revolutionary organizing and activist campaigns since 2012 and was a spokesperson for the Block Cop City Mass Action. So let us bring on to the show Jamie and Sam. Welcome.
Hi.
Hi. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having us.
You guys have an exciting announcement to make about Luigi Mangione and the December 4th Legal Defense Committee.
We've been fundraising for Luigi Mangione on his behalf for about 2 months now. And just in the last week or so, we got wind that he is accepting the funds and they will go towards to cover his legal defense. Not only that, but we'll continue to fundraise on his behalf indefinitely for the duration of the trial. So far, we've raised over $320,000, which really, to be sure, was raised by the 10,000 plus donors, 11,000 plus donors who actually contributed to the fund.
Wow. Well, mazel tov, everyone. This is a big day in history. You guys raised $300,000 for Luigi, and the Katie Halper show reached 250,000 subs. So, milestones. Wow. Yeah.
Congrats all around.
Yeah. So tell us, Jamie, what made you guys get involved in this cause in the first place?
That's a great question. So obviously, the people organizing this all believe in the right to a fair trial. Why did we pick Luigi Mangione in the first place? I think this case has really catalyzed a conversation among Americans and even around the world about our nation's murderous, cruel and unusual is really the best way to describe it, private for-profit health insurance system. And it seems the massive outpouring of support that people have shown for Luigi. If you read the comments on the fundraiser, some of them are really incredibly touching. People who work in the healthcare industry, medical providers saying that they're sick and tired of seeing people suffer and seeing people die because their insurance company decided to deny some life-saving care in order to enrich the profits of shareholders. We've got comments from people saying, my husband died because his cancer treatment was turned down. I'm donating this money for him, things of that nature. So anytime you see massive amounts of Americans talking about healthcare and talking about these class-based issues in such a inspiring way, it seems like something worth paying attention to.
What made you decide to focus on the fundraising side, like the legal defense of it?
Just a little historical fact about the fund is it was actually created in the days immediately after Brian Thompson's untimely passing. It was made before, while the manhunt for whoever the person associated with that was still ongoing, before anyone knew who Luigi was, before this young man was found at McDonald's and alleged to have been connected to the incident. The fundraiser was made preemptively, and that's because we sort of, our wager was that if they end up catching someone and saying that this person is responsible for Thompson's death, they're going to throw the book at them. And the reason for the latter is not only because of the specific act that occurred, but specifically because of the widespread, unprecedented, universal,
post-partisan,
cross-partisan, at the very least, shrugging off of the incident.
Celebrating,
sure. Yeah. Poking fun at it, whatever it is, talking about karmic justice, things like that. And then a few days later, they catch this person and claim that he's connected to the incident. And then the fundraiser just kind of took off from there.
Tell us what, if anything, Luigi has communicated to you guys through his lawyers, or I don't know how he is or isn't communicating with you guys.
He wrote us saying Thank you, basically. The contents of this letter are, he wants them to be private, just between us, which is really sweet, actually. His team contacted us to let us know that they were aware, and Luigi was aware of the fund, and that he was going to be accepting it. Despite having raised over $300,000 already, that's probably not going to be enough to cover all three of the cases.
He's facing charges at the local, state, and federal level. So
Okay.
some charges in Pennsylvania, some charges in the state of New York, and some charges from the feds. And the feds are setting it up for the terroristic murder charges that would make Luigi eligible for being killed by the state.
Right. So I actually wanted to play part of an interview that you did, Jamie, with one of the great Cuomos of the world. There are about three of them that we know of: Chris, Andrew, and Mario. Let's take a look at this interaction that you had with Chris Cuomo so we can engage in some fun media analysis.
The man accused of assassinating United Healthcare CEO is a terrorist, says New York authorities. The official charge, first-degree murder in furtherance of terrorism.
No heroism in what Mangione did. This was a senseless act of violence. It was a cold and calculated crime that stole a life and put New Yorkers at risk. Right. We don't celebrate murders and we don't lionize the killing of anyone. And any attempt to rationalize this is vile, reckless, and offensive to our deeply held principles of justice.
Who's she talking about? People like this.
Honestly, this guy should run for president if he ever gets out of jail. He literally stood in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shot someone in broad daylight, and everybody loves him, not despite of, but because of that. Yeah. And I think that is a beautiful thing. Allegedly.
Right.
Beautiful thing? Everybody loves him? Jamie Peck does. That's who you were just listening to. She is also a spokesperson for a legal defense fund, which has raised, ready for this, more than $150,000.
This is obviously old news. This is from a couple months ago. Now you're at 300,000. I hope Chris has you back on.
Remember, this guy doesn't need the money. The irony is his family made a fortune off of healthcare, nursing homes. But there's no question that on social media, there is a groundswell of support for this guy, but more importantly, for what he did. Why? Let's get the answer from one of them. Jamie Peck joins us now. Thank you for taking the opportunity.
Thank you for having me.
Help me understand, why is it a beautiful thing? Why do you support him assassinating another human being in cold blood?
So I was definitely joking a little bit, obviously drawing a comparison between what Donald Trump said about himself. Yeah, here's where I get to explain to Chris what a podcast is, and that sometimes we joke around.
And that's obviously a reference to the shooting someone on Fifth Avenue, right? The famous Donald Trump line.
This appetite, this excitement for the conversation that Luigi Mangione started. But I do think to call this an act of terrorism is an insult to the intelligence of the American people. Terrorism is something designed to strike fear into the hearts of non-combatant civilians, right? The general population. Nobody but a tiny class of CEOs has been made to live in fear by Luigi's actions.
So, by the way, moving forward, just imagine alleged is implicit in everything that anyone says on the show. Okay, so we're like retroactively and like future casting it in there.
But nearly everybody knows what it's like to live in fear of having a necessary medical claim denied, the fear of having your life ruined or potentially ended by a stack of medical bills. And I think in a system with so much violence that's directed from the top down, it should come as no surprise when violence begins to boomerang back from the bottom up onto the 1%. Also, I would like to remind you on the subject of terrorism, nearly 3,000 Americans lost their lives on 9/11, right? This is the largest terrorist attack this country has ever seen. An estimated 190,000 people are murdered each year by our broken healthcare system. That is the equivalent of 52 9/11s worth of deaths every year. Every single week, another 9/11 happens. So I got to ask, who is the more prolific terrorist in this equation?
Good question. That is a good question. And that was a great interaction. Anything you wish you had said to him that you didn't get to say? I mean, you did a great job. I'm just want to give you the chance.
Thank you for that. Well, I think so far I said what I needed to. There is a part, are we going to keep going? Because there's a part where he tries to make me look like a hypocrite because I am against the US-backed genocide in Gaza.
Yes.
You know, you are somebody who in your positions is constantly trying to embrace the humanity of situations, right? I've been looking at why you support what you do with what's happening in the Middle East conflict. To me, this seems to be anathema to this. You know, nothing within a system gets changed by violence. How can you expect?
Really?
Yeah, we're having a conversation, but we're not having the right one because the healthcare industry now has high ground because they've been victimized by this chooch. This isn't how we get insurance to be better, by putting a bullet in somebody's head. Why would you get behind that?
Absolutely everybody that I talked to for advice about this highly stressful, hostile interview that I had about 3 hours of notice to prepare
you did
for.
very good.
My bad.
Why, thank you. Like everyone told me, you just need to harp on your points. Don't let him lead you down any dark alleyways or whatever. So that's just kind of what I did. But like, I actually do have an answer for that. Like, part of me wishes I debated him a little bit more because so many of the things he said just now were absolutely absurd on their face. From nothing has ever gotten changed by violence in the history of this country.
U.S.
Like,
have the founding of this great country, this great nation.
Yeah, I mean, this country was literally founded on violence and is continually maintained by violence, which is generally directed from the top down, right? It's very rare that you see violence coming from the bottom up, but I do think that's an inevitable fact, especially when something one of the great injustices of our time has been completely unaddressed by either of the major parties. It was not an issue in this last election. And in fact, hundreds of thousands of people lost healthcare under the Biden administration. But if you want to look at history, we had to fight a war to end chattel slavery, right? Which was the great injustice of that time. And if you want to contextualize it, you know, things like slave uprisings where slaves killed their masters, or John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry, these things were viewed as terrorism in their time. And John Brown especially was viewed as a completely crazy person. I think people really need to be taking the wide view on this, as well as evaluate things in their proper ethical context.
The whole conversation of talking about violence reminds me a little bit of when people talk about Hamas and Israel and terrorism, and they say that Hamas is a terrorist organization, and then they don't acknowledge that Israel commits terrorism at it's not comparable the way that they are engaging in terrorism. Israel committed a vast amount of war crimes. Just on October 7th, Israel committed way more war crimes than has been acknowledged. We know that there's a Hannibal directive that was issued. We know Israel killed their own. We know they've been killing their own, and not to mention the Palestinians. But whenever someone talks about like Hamas's crimes, unless they're prepared to call out the infinitely greater terrorism committed by Israel, they just have absolutely no leg to stand on. So if Chris Cuomo wants to, condemn or call out murder, that's fine. But if he doesn't acknowledge the murderous nature of our healthcare system, then he likewise has no leg to stand on.
And it's hard because that's what all of the pundits are really trying to focus on, right? They want the spectacular sort of like moral conundrum of, are you endorsing murder, right? When we call one person getting killed, we call that a murder. But what do we call it, right? When we have a system that very predictably is
and intentionally
is set up to cause the early deaths of tens of thousands, probably more people per year, we call it good business, right? And we act like that's just a fact of life.
Right.
It should be called bureaucratic murder, or something, right? And it's like every single time that we talk to the media, it's the same thing. It's like, well, are you endorsing murder? Did Brian Thompson deserve to die? And it's like, at the end of the day, like, I don't pretend to know who can live and die, unlike Brian Thompson and the other people on his fucking executive team. So, it's you can't separate these like larger ethical questions and these individual moral snapshots.
Right. Yeah. Which is why, by the way, I just had on Wallace Shawn, and there's a clip that I released that's gone really viral where he says that Israel is committing crimes worse than the crimes committed by the Nazis. And in the larger discussion, he talks about how he is a pacifist. Like, he embraces pacifism. He doesn't hate people anymore. He used to. But the reason that I found that conversation so amazing is because, like, I'm so tired of people embracing pacifism, condemning Hamas, and not condemning Israel. If you're someone like Wallace Shawn who calls Israel out for their terrorism, I'm much more comfortable with your kind of analysis of pacifism. And he also was like, and who am I to tell Palestinians what to do? Like, he was very aware of that. Another person who I think does an excellent job at this is Cornel West, because Cornel West says, yes, there were war crimes committed by Hamas on October 7th, obviously way more by Israel. But he says Hamas is actually an anti-terrorist organization because it was founded to take on Israel, which is the bigger terrorist. So those are the types of people who I am very happy to hear kind of waxing poetic or waxing philosophical about murder and violence. But when it's people who are okay with the murder built into the system, whether it's healthcare or the occupation, that's when they should just, take a walk.
I did have a little bit of the spirit of the stairs regarding the offensive comparison he made to the US-backed genocide in Gaza. And I actually tweeted about it, saying how offensive it was for him to compare the untimely death of one CEO with a lot of blood on his hands to the wholesale slaughter of thousands of men, women, and children who are part of an oppressed nation. So Cuomo actually saw that I tweeted this, and he slid into my DMs, and he was really mad.
Yeah, he didn't like that.
Ooh, yeah. You want to read them? Yeah, why not?
Wow. Here it comes. The tea is steeping here.
Also, as you find that, I'll just say a couple things, which is like, there's moral arguments to be made, and then there are historical arguments, statements of fact. So he's incorrect, right? Violence has made changes. You can argue that it's immoral and indefensible, but that's a separate argument. The other thing that he's wrong about is that the healthcare industry has the high moral high ground. That's not true. Yeah. This is not created like a swell of sympathy for the healthcare industry. If anything, people have been shocked by how either tolerant, understanding, or outright celebratory people have been towards Luigi.
Yeah, fact check. It is not possible for an individual to victimize the health insurance industry. Yeah. And I don't think anybody thinks that it is.
I mean, if you found like a janitor who worked for the healthcare industry, right, and like you took them out, that would be maybe an unintentional way for them to weaponize it, but not when it's a CEO who's basically signing people's death warrants.
Yeah, I don't think that this industry is ever going to be able to claim the moral high ground.
I do want to, I think everyone is like chomping at the bits to hear the DMs from